and welcome to Move or Improve with Debbie. I'm Debbie Miller, and thanks for joining me today. We have a lot of clients who are selling their single family home and they want to move to a community. It may be an active adult community, it may be a condominium, but there are HOAs or condo associations that are involved, and a lot of people get confused or irritated with what the rules are as far as living there. So I have asked an expert, Jessica Youngs, who is with Kase and Associates, and she is a whiz at real estate related topics, especially HOAs. So we're going to talk to her about the ABCs of HOAs today, because I know I've run into a number of issues over the years where people didn't understand what was going on with, why do I have to obey those rules? They're stupid. Well, you shouldn't have bought in there then anyway. But welcome to the show, Jessica. I appreciate your being on with me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Debbie. It's a pleasure.
Not a problem. And we want to just make a disclaimer that it's not state-specific advice that she's going to be giving, and you should seek independent legal counsel for any contract-related questions. We're going to have Jessica share her email address and website at the end of the program so that if you do have more general questions, you can contact her. But let's talk a little bit about what does a homeowners association or a condo association do, and how does it do it, and sometimes even why do they do it that way? So talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So a homeowners or condo association is an organization of homeowners for a particular subdivision, condo, or planned unit development that provides a common basis for preserving, maintaining, and enhancing the homes and the property in that community. So often, particularly with a condo association or a larger homeowners association, they are professionally managed, but in some smaller homeowners associations in particular, they could be homeowner managed. But either way, the homeowners do have some say because there's always a board of directors that are made up of members of that community, and they have input as to changes in the rules and regulations of the community, and also how they actually go about implementing the existing rules. So hiring the lawn maintenance crew and, preserving the pool or any sort of common areas, they help manage those areas.
Okay, well, that makes good sense because it does assure some sort of unanimity to the neighborhood, and you don't have to worry about somebody putting his truck up on bricks or something to work on it over the weekend. But so what should people look for? I know that most states have the laws that rule a HOA document review or condominium review, and there's a timeline. But what kinds of things should they look for? I know in our state you get a copy of the budget and a reserve study, that sort of thing. What are the really important things to look for when a person is reviewing those documents?
Absolutely. So for the first and most important thing, as you brought up, would be the budget and anything budget related. So you want to look for, first of all, to make sure that the association is solvent. And that's particularly important in condo associations, because even though there may be people that are going in and paying cash for a condo unit, you want to make sure that that's a sound investment and you're not going to be hit with a lot of fees in the future. So those future fees could come from special assessments. So you want to look at the minutes of the last few meetings to see if there's been any discussion of special assessments that are forthcoming, because if those special assessments haven't actually gone into effect yet, those will become the burden of the new owner. And the existing owner doesn't need to disclose that most of the time because that's already disclosed as part of the resale package from the condo association. And the other thing that you want to look for that I tell cash buyers a lot is looking to see if it's mostly an investor community, or if it's mostly people who are living there at least most of the time themselves. Because if you had to do a cash out refinance in the future, for example, a lender is going to look at that, and there's some lenders that may not lend to you if you're buying in a heavily investor owned community. So those are things that I would look for if it were me. And then the other thing to look for is maybe some quirky rules that you might not think about, particularly if you are used to living in a single-family home with a traditional homeowners association and then you're moving to a condo. So for example, I had a closing just a couple of weeks ago where it was a young man that was buying a condo with his parents. The three of them were moving in. It was going to be their primary home, and it was a first floor unit, and the bedrooms had hardwood floors. So he thought, this is great. I have this wonderful new condo. It's convenient to my office, and it has these beautiful hardwood floors. Well, the condo association disclosure package came and it had a violation, which is the other thing you need to look for. You need to look at all violations, which are typically listed in the first few pages. Because if those violations aren't fixed prior to closing, then those become the new owner's problem. And what this man discovered when he was looking at the condo resale disclosure package is that one of the violations was the bedroom hardwood floors. So he reached out to the seller, and the seller reached out to the condo association, and the condo association said, yes, that's a violation, but if the seller has a medical reason why they need hardwood floors, which in this case the seller did, they were actually in a wheelchair, so they required it because it was easier to move the chair on the hardwood versus carpet, which is what was actually required by the condo documents, then they would give an exemption. So the seller provided a doctor's note, and the exemption came through. But unfortunately, just a couple of days after this young man and his parents went to closing, the condo association came back to them and said, well, the seller had an exemption, but you're the new owner, so you either need to present your own exemption reason or you need to change out the hardwood floors for carpet because that's what our resale package requires. So I would look for those rules that may impact the interior of your new home as well as the exterior.
Yeah, because someone from the condo association or someone in charge usually does an inspection, and they can highlight certain things that they see needing to be repaired before it can go to settlement. And the buyer doesn't want to inherit any kind of issues like that. They don't want to have to pay or whatever. So it can be an issue that I think is probably pretty high on the list of things to watch for. But some other things that, they need to check into are, can you have pets? Because a lot of places won't allow for pets, and they may restrict the type of pet or the size of the pet, like a dog can only be a certain amount. I know when we had the real estate problem several years ago, and people were just leaving the condo, Florida suffered greatly from this. They just wouldn't pay. And so they were investors, but they didn't care because they could just do a write-off. And so it left the residents of the condos in a bad situation because they had to pay their fee. Plus there was a shortage because the people who fled and just didn't pay left the owners in a bad situation. So that's something else that sometimes you can't even know if that's going to be the case. But I think special assessments is another issue that really needs to be looked at carefully. And a lot of times,
absolutely.
don't they have review studies that they do and reserve studies that say, hey, the parking lot's going to need to be done in the next 10 years, or the air conditioner system is going to need to be done. So can you talk a little bit about how they might be able to budget for that?
Absolutely. So that's why it's so important to look at the minutes of the last several meetings as well. And if you can, it's always a great idea to see if you can actually attend one of the community meetings before purchasing so that you sort of know what you're getting into and you know what the hot topics are. I had another closing a couple of months ago where it was in the resale disclosure package for the prior 5 years that all the windows on the condo association needed to be updated, or on the condo building rather, needed to be updated. And that meant that there was going to be a $20,000 special assessment on each unit owner. That assessment hadn't yet gone into effect. The buyer didn't read the disclosure package of her own admission. She just didn't read it. She sort of ignored it. She wanted that unit. She had her mind set, and she ignored everything. And then 2 months after she went to closing, guess what? That special assessment was voted on by the members of the community. She did vote against it, but then she was subject to it. So she had to come up with this extra $20,000 that she wasn't planning on, but it was part of the resale package. It wasn't yet pending, so it wasn't due at settlement, but it was something that was coming down the line that was very much discoverable. So it's really important to read those documents carefully. Often it's, a couple hundred pages, but it's really worth sitting down and reading that cover to cover.
For sure. Well, I just had a situation where the property does not currently have a fence in the rear yard, but the buyer wanted to install a fence. So I sent them the architectural guidelines for review before they wrote the offer, because I didn't want to get into it. And then they find out, oh, well, we can't do a fence and I don't want it. And then here we are stuck with having to put it back on the market. So the architectural guidelines, though, were very specific, and they showed photos of the type of fencing, the look of it, what you had to do specifically. And it was very helpful to the buyers, because they could see, okay, great, I can have a fence. It can't be in the front yard, but I can have it in the backyard, so that the dogs and the kids can run freely and not have to worry. So it is helpful to review the architectural guidelines for any community, because I know there are communities out there where the condo association or the homeowners association can put a lien on your property and prevent you from selling until it's resolved. I've been involved with that before, and it's not fun, that's for sure. Talk for a minute. I know that a number of places will have an HOA that governs the entire community, but then you have a cluster fee, or you're in a condo within that community. So you're really paying two types of fees.
Absolutely. So that's very important. You can be subject to multiple homeowners associations, or you can be subject to a homeowners association and a condo association. And then there's even variations within that. So basically, what it means is you're subject to the global community rules, that master association, and then subject to rules within your specific community or even your specific building. And then on top of that, it's possible to have social membership dues as well. And sometimes those are optional. For example, there could be pool fees or golf course fees, and sometimes those are required extra additional fees. So you don't get a choice whether to be part of that extra community. You're actually charged those fees on top of it and subject to those guidelines. And of course, those fees can go towards pool, golf course, other amenities, which all may be wonderful things. But I actually wanted to go back to one of the things you were talking about a minute ago, as far as placing a lien on the property. Absolutely, that's something to look out for, and that's something that we always review as part of the closing process. We both get that information from the homeowners association and from the title search. But the other thing that the communities can do and will do if necessary is they can actually go in after they've warned the homeowner that they need to bring their unit or their home up to the community standards. If the homeowner refuses to do that, the community can actually go in, complete the work, and then bill the homeowner for that work. And if they refuse to pay it, then they can be subject to penalties in the that are set out in the covenants of the homeowners association or condo association, plus be subject to paying that bill and any penalties associated with late payment of that bill too.
Yes, and I unfortunately I've seen that happen, and it's not pretty, or the person has passed away and the heirs have to take care of selling, and they come in cold. They don't know what's going on. They just know they have to do whatever has to be done to clean it out and get it ready for sale, and then they find out all these infractions. It can get interesting, and I have heard of various situations where it's taken more than just a few weeks to resolve. It's taken months to get something straightened out, and if you can't sell your property, then it's not a whole lot of good to even have invested in it to begin with. But
exactly.
I think what we were talking a few minutes ago about, I always like to tell people, if you can, obviously you'll find neighbors who near the pool or whatever who are willing to open up about what they like or don't like. And it's always kind of a nice idea to find out the ones that don't like living there, because you'll get more of the lowdown on the place. But